Good afternoon, everyone. I know people are still filtering in from the waiting room. We'll give them about 30 seconds or so to get settled. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today to learn more about the 2021 Chicago Waste Strategy. We're very excited to share the full reports yesterday afternoon, and if you haven't had a chance to do so, please check them out on the Office of the Mayor's Sustainability page. This strategy represents the first step in reimagining the waste system in Chicago, and we're very excited to continue the conversation and work towards implementation in the months ahead. My name is Megan Conway, and I'm with the Delta Institute. And I'll ask my co-panelists to quickly introduce themselves and give a wave, and then we can get started.
Hey everybody, this is Bill Schleiser, also from the Delta Institute. So excited that you could join us this afternoon. I'll pass it over to Chris.
Hi, Chris Sauvé. I'm a deputy commissioner here at the City of Chicago, the Department of Streets and Sanitation. I've been working on our waste and recycling issues for the past 15 years or so. With me in my office is Wilson Mora. Wilson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilson Mora, Director for the city's Blue Card program. I've been with this role for the last year and a half.
And we'll throw it back over to Angela.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Angela Tovar. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago. And I will turn it over to our colleagues at UIC.
Thank you, Angela. Hi, this is Ning Ai. I'm a faculty at the UIC, primarily working on social economic aspects of solid waste management. We'll talk more later.
Great, thank you so much. And a few housekeeping notes. We're planning to leave time at the end for Q&A, so please feel free to submit questions either in the chat or the Q&A box throughout, and we'll address them after the presentation. So, and also we're recording this webinar, so if you or know others that couldn't make it this afternoon, they'll be able to view the recording soon. And with that, I will pass it over to Angela Tovar to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I think we can go ahead to the next slide because I think that you gave a great intro. You know, as Megan mentioned, this is an overhauling of our waste system, right? And thinking about how we can reframe our traditional system and move toward more of a materials management strategy. And so we're excited to share our journey, the research that we have conducted, and some of the recommendations that are coming out of this report. And just to give you all some context, you know, the city, the mayor's office and Streets and Sand came together to talk about how we can advance a, you know, more robust strategy around waste, and, you know, went ahead and hired the Delta Institute to look at new opportunities and for the city of Chicago. And so this is an outcome of that work, which has been a year in the making. And so we're excited to present today. The agenda for this afternoon, we'll talk about the different elements of the report. If you've seen the link already, you know that it's pretty big, right? There are 5 reports, including including an executive summary as well. And so we want to share some details for that. We'll talk about the recommendations that have come out of the report, which is covered in the materials management strategy, as well as sharing with you all some near-term priorities that the city has committed to for 2021 and 22. We will then talk about implementation and next steps, and then we will leave time for discussion and feedback from the audience. And then we can jump right into the next slide. We can talk for a minute about the project overview. So again, you know, we knew that we wanted to, as the city, wanted to create a new pathway to divert materials and to think about new opportunities in waste. And so we partnered with the Delta Institute to develop this overarching assessment to do some planning work and to create this implementation strategy. And the idea here is that we needed to create this clear pathway to overhaul the city's materials management system with a goal to reduce waste, to increase diversion and recycling, and to recover assets from the waste stream for economic opportunity. And so some of the things that we had to do in order to get us here, we reviewed the current waste and recycling policies, the contracts, the data and infrastructure. We engaged with a number of stakeholders. I believe it was 90 in total, from city departments, from the private sector, and from community-based organizations. We did an analysis of best practices from other cities throughout the country, as well as learning from their successes and their failures as well. And then we came together to develop and prioritize strategies for waste reduction, for recycling, and for reuse that consider diverse material types, right? And also really guided by the updated data from the waste characterization study. What are our biggest waste generators here in the city? Next slide. And so, you know, again, there are different elements of this work. There's an executive summary. We have an existing conditions report, which sort of gives you the landscape of, you know, what the waste ecosystem looks like now here in the city of Chicago. A peer city analysis, which is that national scan of best practices. The updated data from the waste characterization and generation report, and then the recommendations which are found in the materials management strategy. I think it's important to mention that this initiative just represents the first step. What's critical here, and I think, you know, I think what's important, some of the questions that we're already hearing, you know, through social media and just folks that are already talking about the materials management strategy and some of our recommendations, is that this is a policy direction that we're setting, right? We know that the traditional systems that we have are good. We know that the city can be doing a lot more to divert waste. We know that there's a tremendous opportunity to create jobs, to activate community organizations, and to really, as the city of Chicago, support a healthier waste ecosystem for the city. So this is very much a first step and in moving toward a better direction. You know, we will continue to think about how to prioritize actionable strategies to achieve ambitious goals in this space. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who's going to walk us through the different reports.
Thanks, Angela. As she mentioned, the first report in the series is the existing conditions report. This includes a review of Chicago's current and past waste and recycling programs and infrastructure, additional materials management services available to residents, and a review of existing planning documents and applicable ordinances at the city, county, state, and national level. This report includes information on waste generation and recycling trends in the city and more broadly, as well as the documented impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on materials management. This report also includes an analysis of the economic, environmental, public health, and equity impacts of the current waste management system in Chicago. Next, the Peer City Analysis Report reviews programs and policies that have been successful in other municipalities in the Midwest and across the country to identify what has worked well elsewhere and what could serve as a model here. This information, along with interviews with over 90 internal and external stakeholders, help to develop and prioritize our recommendations for Chicago. And the next supporting report is the Waste Generation and Characterization Update Report. This was conducted by our partners at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Prior to this report, the most recent major waste characterization study for the city was published in 2009. So it was important in developing the strategies to have more up-to-date and more relevant data. Ning, Junjun, and the rest of the team at UIC used sampling data from 2009 as a baseline to conduct analysis and modeling to update waste generation and characterization estimates for 2020. These models were supported by recent data from the city, peer city comparisons, and consumer and industry trends to develop numbers that we use to establish the current conditions and prioritize the strategies we developed in the report. And now I will pass it over to Ning to talk in a little more detail about their methodology.
Okay.
And we can see your slides.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah. Just okay. Thank you, Megan. Thanks to the Delta Institute and the City of Chicago for inviting us to participate in this important study. And thanks to you all for taking time to join the webinar today and show your support. So my summary report today will focus on numerical analysis of 2020 Chicago waste generation and the characterization update. The data analysis is assisted by UIC PhD candidate Junjin Zheng, and the full report also includes quantitative information about the reviews of material trends, which I welcome you to check them out. Those are assisted by 12 master students in urban planning and policy, Taylor and Matt. So before I get into specific numbers, here are some important clarifications. The 2020 update includes both reported and estimated data, because the availability and the quality of reported data vary by sector and by service providers. And because of full-scale waste auditing was impossible during the study period, the UIC team developed estimates when data incomplete. The following slides will explain them in details. Now, 2020 data presented for information. Please note that data interpretation and the comparison of data should note the context and limitations. For example, this 2020 update includes a smaller scope of CND waste. This only includes building waste. Thus, it is smaller in terms of total waste volume estimate when you compare to 2010 report. Across regions, the US EPA reports for the national average data and other regions may have defined or measured the waste streams differently. Thus, it can be inappropriate for direct comparisons. In addition, tonnage is not and should not be regarded as the single metric to measure waste performance or impact over time. For example, we have observed the lightweighting trends of beverage containers and electronics. So here's a quick overview of our methodology and objectives of this study. First one is replicability. We would like to have this study replicable for other cities, communities, as well as the City of Chicago to use over time. We meant to have this consistent with 2010 study to the extent possible. In terms of methodology and references, we developed at least 2 methods of volume estimates for each sector and validated results using locally reported data wherever possible. We separated material categories for data quality control. That's to, in other words, we didn't mix different sectors when we see different levels of confidence. In addition, we estimate based on generators or locations just to avoid double counting if we had adopted the material-based estimates. The quantitative analysis was integrated with qualitative comprehensive literature review. Lastly, we focus on the connection between data and actionable information. Hopefully, this provides you a solid basis to inform your waste management planning process. In the next few slides, I'll summarize the results by waste sector or generators one by one. The categories and the definitions of 2010 Chicago reports were adopted for consistency. So the total waste generation is the sum of refuse and commodity, and the total waste includes waste from 3 general categories: single-family residential, ICI, which means institutional, commercial, and industrial, and CND, construction and demolition waste. So for clarification, single-family residential typically refers to those with 4 or fewer units, and waste is collected by City Department of Streets and Sanitation. ICI waste collected by private haulers, and ICI waste includes multifamily residential waste. CND waste is collected by both city and the private haulers. A separate and distinct category is about yard waste. It is calculated as a part of the single-family residential waste volume. and thus not added as a separate category, but I will present the results separately in this presentation. First, let's look at the single-family residential waste managed by city. This is the only complete set of waste records across waste generation sectors in Chicago. In 2020, the city reported nearly 10% increase of waste from single-family homes. We also performed the time series analysis of historical data, predicted the values from the time series in pre-COVID years matched the historical data, which means the difference in 2020 can be partially resulted from the pandemic condition. Over the years, material collection volume is generally consistent with the number of city-served homes with seasonal fluctuations. As you see here, the great expansion of the city blue and black card programs has resulted in a much greater volume of waste material collected. On a per household basis, the recycling volume decreased after program expansion to citywide implementation, which suggests the increase in recycling participation did not keep up with the city's recycling program expansion. On a positive side, around 2018, the trend turned around when the city launched community campaigns to boost the residents' participation in recycling and to reduce contamination. So here's the empirical evidence that education does matter. Next, we'll look into the total of residential waste. While single-family residential waste is managed by the city, multi-family residential waste is managed by private haulers together with ICI waste, which was not reported separately. Thus, the UIC team made estimates based on the trends of housing units shown in this chart. As the number of multifamily housing units has been increasing, we estimated that waste generated from multifamily homes also increased in the last decade. On average, we estimated that for each Chicago resident, 3 pounds of waste generated per day at the home. For clarification, this is solely referring to residential waste. For each household, it's about 3,000 pounds of waste per year. It may also help to note the per person or per household generation rate is slightly higher than some peer cities or regions. So this definitely shows potential for source reduction in Chicago residential homes. Next, let's look at the ICI sector. This is managed by private haulers, and the waste stream includes multifamily residential waste. However, the quality of hauler reports vary, so we have to develop our own estimates based on employment size and consumer expenditure. The chart you see here reflects the trends of employment over time, and we found the fastest growth in employment size in restaurant, food industry, and professional services. And when we assume the per employee waste generation rate remains the same over time, we will be able to develop estimates of the waste composition in ICR. So in the chart at the bottom, you'll see over time compared to 2010, fastest growth occurred in glass and organic waste materials. The third general category will be CND waste. CND waste was reported by some private haulers, but not all of them. We analyzed the data between 2010 and 2015 based on the haulers report and found changes in composition of CND waste. As you see in the chart here, there has been increasing shares of asphalt and concrete, decreasing shares of steel and refuse. Annual estimates are developed by the UIC team based on employment size, residential building permits, and the construction jobs. And we compare the results from different methods, and glad to see they are relatively consistent. Again, it should be very important to note, we only focus on building CND in this update. Other CND waste materials, like those from road and bridge construction and maintenance activities, excluded due to data constraints and time constraints of the 6-week study. Lastly, I'll get to the organic waste. As explained earlier, it was not separately aggregated because it could possibly involve some double counting. But I would like to mention that because of possibly increasing trend, given several identified factors, it's mixing other waste streams, both residential and ICI. We checked into the city reports and found the total yard waste about over 70,000 tons per year. For food waste, our previous study at UIC estimated that there will be over 450,000 tons per year. For more details, you're welcome to check out our website, go.uic.edu/food waste for neighborhood food waste estimates and decision-making information. In total, if we add up yard waste and food waste, that will be over 500,000 tons per year. And based on this estimate, if implementing source separation of 75% organic waste from single-family homes would boost landfill diversion rate by 18.6%. Okay, lastly, when we combine this sector-based analysis together, we see overall there's an increase in waste generation in the last decade. Yearly fluctuations of waste generation volume seem to respond to economic conditions. The city of Chicago generated 4.13 million tons of waste in 2020. Note again, this is not for direct comparison to 2010 study. The 2010 reports recorded 7.67 million tons, which includes a broader scope of the CND. If we adopt the same scope and the methods, we backcasted the numbers and estimated 4.02 million tons in 2010. So we do see an increase in overall waste generation in the city. Lastly, I'll add a word of caution. When interpreting waste volume in 2020, given the COVID-19 pandemic conditions, there could be limitations. All right, just to summarize on the results, total generation volume in Chicago has not changed much, but location shifted towards residences. This is very important considering residents may lack of recycling information options, and that can contribute to the increase in residential waste generation volume in 2010. Also, there is notable impact from COVID-19 in terms of both quantity and the composition. There are important implications for increases in multifamily housing units, given well-documented challenges among multifamily residential recycling programs nationwide. We also see data of the increases boom in restaurant and food industry, which could lead to potential increases in food scrap. Lastly, I do want to add a suggestion when it comes to data analysis reports and data sharing. It's very important for keep data consistency and promote clarity and transparency, as well as enforcement of data reporting process. All right, you're welcome to check out the full report. If you have further questions or feedback, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ning. I'll switch over the screen share one more time. All right, so UIC's data, along with stakeholder interviews, existing conditions research, and the peer city analysis provided the foundation for a new materials management system for the city. And in order to build on that foundation and develop the materials management strategies for Chicago, we first established 6 guiding principles that would identify the general direction and overarching framework for the strategy. So I'll go quickly through these principles and then pass it back over to Angela to talk more specifically about the strategies themselves. The first principle is to reframe Chicago's materials as resources instead of waste. This demonstrates the major cultural shift that the city is taking away from a disposal system towards materials management and circularity. We wanted to put forth strategies that deprioritize incremental improvements to the current disposal system and focuses more on upstream interventions like source reduction and reuse in order to maximize the impact on the environment and climate, the economy, and communities in Chicago. Next, we wanted to highlight the importance of centering equity and environmental justice in programs design. When offering strategies to decrease waste and increase diversion, it was important to consider both ensuring that new programs and policies don't create an additional burden, as well as trying to target benefits, particularly for communities that have historically been burdened with a disproportionate amount of the city's waste infrastructure and the negative public health and economic impacts associated with that. The third principle recognizes that even though this is the city's materials management strategy, the city alone doesn't have the ability to make changes at the scale we're hoping to see. Partnerships and engagement with organizations, businesses, and institutions who are already pushing innovations in materials management will be a huge part of the implementation strategy. The fourth principle is to prioritize initiatives with either a potential to generate revenue, minimum or zero implementation cost, or a positive return on investment when applied at scale. Especially considering the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and economic lens, it was important for us to identify realistic strategies that can move forward in a difficult budgetary reality and prioritize investment where it can make the biggest impact towards meeting the city's goals. The fifth principle is about identifying opportunities for setting goals and identifying metrics for success, as well as improving data collection, both for the city and to share with residents around progress around reaching those goals. Increasing the quality and accessibility of waste data in the city will help to improve transparency in this system, as well as improving effectiveness and impact of programs and policies. And finally, we wanted to highlight the fact that any changes and improvements to the materials management system needs both initial and upfront, as well as continuous community engagement and public education in order to be successful. And now to talk a bit more about the strategies, I will pass it over to Angela.
Thank you, Megan. And so, you know, Delta identified implementation opportunities across 7 categories. So we are looking at, you know, everything from municipal management and policy to the waste streams that flow through the city. So in each of these categories, Delta provided several options for the city to allow for things that are short-term implementation, as well as long-term you know, recommendations that would require budget planning and partnership building. In total, there were 63 recommendations that were recommended by Delta that were developed for the study. 12 of them were things that the city came back with to say, you know what, out of this list of recommendations, we are going to take this list of 12, and these are things that we can do in the short term to really drive momentum and to continue this work forward. These are things that would require additional research in some cases, but were things that we wanted to hit the ground running with. And so the categories that are included in the materials management strategy are municipal management and data tracking, source reduction, reuse and repair, residential waste reduction, industrial, commercial, institutional waste reduction or ICI reduction, organics and wasted food, specialty materials, and construction and demolition debris. Next slide. And this is one of the exciting things about this for the city, is that the way that Delta organized this work is that it was created as a menu of strategies for the city to consider and to really think about where we could pursue new funding opportunities. Again, the opportunity to increase our partnerships in this space. And as a city to really think about what is important to us as an administration and how we can prioritize these. So the framework provides this tiered model for assessing these key factors, and it's organized into 3 categories. The optimal, which are strategies that are complex and would be demanding in terms of coordination and resources now, but that really have the greatest opportunity to you know, increase our diversion in the city. Practical strategies, things that can be implemented that are less demanding and can still be implemented at full scale, less ambitious, but just more attainable in terms of progress, and may not require the same amount of resources. And then the pilot projects, and those are projects that are, designed for site-specific implementation, that are very feasible, and that would require a relatively low demand for additional coordination and resources. Next slide. And so we can go into a little bit more depth on the materials management strategies and the recommendations. The first one, as I mentioned, is materials management and materials management and data tracking. I just lost my page here. And that one is, includes guidance for the city of Chicago and our facilities. It really looks at how the city can do a much better job with interdepartmental collaboration and communication. It provides guidance on the city improving our data collection and management. And it really looks at how we can increase transparency in the process and rebuild trust among Chicago residents. And I will mention a couple of recommendations that have come out of this category, really looking internally and identifying opportunities for the city to lead by example through updating our own procedures for municipal offices and facilities is a practical recommendation that is coming out of this work. There are a number of recommendations that look at improving data tracking and sharing. And one of them is a suggestion maybe for us to look at streamlining permitting, reporting and enforcement standards and responsibilities between city departments. And then building municipal capacity. How can we as the city ensure that the next budget and beyond really reflects what's needed here to drive this transition to a new materials management strategy, and how we can build capacity within DSS and other departments to lead this work. And that's reflected in the recommendations as well. The next category is source reduction, reuse, and repair. And so this is really intended at looking upstream, right? How do we as the city prevent materials from entering the waste stream? And how do we, really look at reducing greenhouse gas emissions here, by reducing landfilling, by reducing transportation and processing that's needed for the traditional waste process, and really strengthening our ability as a city to drive more models of circularity, right? And so a number of recommendations that are coming out of this section. The first category within this section is supporting material reuse. And so looking at new ideas for material exchanges, looking at a comprehensive directory of places that may already take some of these materials. The next section in this category is opportunities for source reduction, potentially supporting the, and one of the recommendations is to support the plastic-free ordinance, or some of the work that people in the policy and advocacy space have been driving to reduce the use of single-use plastics, as well as styrofoam in the city of Chicago, and a couple of other recommendations to just minimize things like junk mail. Repair and share is another exciting opportunity, and there's some recommendations listed under this, looking at models for repair cafes that exist already, looking at where we can find share or rental models and really establish those in the city of Chicago. Other cities do a great job of having like tool libraries, and really looking how to support those types of models here in the city. The next category is residential waste reduction, looking at how we can improve and account for the nearly 40% of the city's overall waste stream, which is coming from residential waste, and thinking about how we can reduce waste volume, and again, improve those recycling and diversion rates. One of the things that I think I found notable about the UIC study was that if we created, source separated organics for single family homes, that we could potentially increase our diversion rate as the city of Chicago by 18.6%. That number really resonated with us as a team. And I think that there are a number of really great recommendations here on how we as the city can think about improving our programs and our investments in this area. So the first recommendation category that's coming out of residential waste reduction is improving low density residential waste diversion and, of course, reducing contamination, right? There are some recommendations that are looking at how we do better education and messaging to reduce contamination, introducing additional recycling streams to improve curbside recycling quality, looking at how we can potentially change the distribution of blue cart to black carts for the city of Chicago is another example. High density residential waste diversion is another category within here. You all may know that ahead of this in December 2020, the Office of Inspector General gave DSS's enforcement department a number of recommendations. That is something that is reflected in this report of things that we know that we need to improve upon. So there's a category in here, or recommendation in here, that talks about how the city can continue to improve its enforcement and what technical barriers are in place now that can be improved upon to ensure success in this space. Increased outreach and education for high density residential is another recommendation. There are a number of other recommendations in this category for public education and engagement as well. And then going on to industrial, commercial and institutional waste reduction. This is looking at, again, the different sectors within ICI, including our restaurants and office buildings, and even our other, sister agencies, our cultural institutions, educational institutions, and then, manufacturing and industrial processes as well. The first one is commercial waste generation and hauling. One of the exciting recommendations here is looking at implementing waste hauling zones for commercial waste, something that has been successfully implemented in LA and New York that we can learn from. The potential for updating the benchmarking ordinance to include waste tracking for large commercial buildings is another recommendation that came out of that category. As you all can imagine, we have so many world-class institutions here in Chicago. There's a tremendous opportunity to partner with our institutions and to think about how we can look at new pilot initiatives and public education and engagement strategies, thinking about ways that we can work with our cultural institutions to increase material diversion, and then looking at waste system infrastructure and industrial operations. Another policy recommendation is to look statewide with other advocates at the potential for extended producer responsibility legislation. Lawmakers are already looking at that in states like California and Maryland, New Hampshire. I believe that Maine was the first state to recently pass EPR legislation, and that's really looking at putting the onus back on the manufacturer for the end of life recovery or safe disposal of their products. And so that's an exciting thing that has been proposed that we are looking into. Also, thinking more, and as we are, reviewing right now some of our land use and zoning policies as the city of Chicago, also, thinking about what the zoning of waste operation facilities and how we can continue to avoid, or how we can as a city avoid negative environmental impacts, particularly in our environmental justice communities. Organics in food, as you all can imagine, is the next category and has a number of exciting recommendations for the city. I will say that one early win of this has been that this team here, as well as our colleagues from other colleagues from the mayor's office and the Chicago Department of Public Health, have joined and have been accepted to the NRDC Food Matters cohort for the Great Lakes region. And that's a group of Midwestern cities that are looking at how we can drive more food rescue, how we can support the food rescue network here in Chicago, and how we can implement new strategies for food waste. And there are a number of things that we are already driving in that space, including looking at the potential for a citywide drop-off service for composting. We have talked about, there's a recommendation here for a citywide food rescue program. You all may know that there are many organizations that are already doing that work, and there's an opportunity for us to really support that network and to find ways for the city to plug in to really strengthen the work that's already being done there. Organics and scrap collection, of course, is here. Again, thinking about where we can look at those permanent drop-off sites, or even thinking about where there may be potential opportunities for a ride along with yard waste collection for food scraps. The next category within that, sorry, I'm going to stick to organics and food waste for a second, is just ICI, specifically the industrial, commercial and institutional sectors. I'm thinking about waste prevention and food scrap diversion in particular for ICI. And there are a number of categories that looks at how we can potentially, again, partner with our sister agencies and our cultural institutions to model some of the great work that has already been done with, like, you know, agencies like CPS and Park District, and to continue to support those projects at a larger scale. I will transition now to the next category, which is specialty materials, which is looking at all of the, you know, the items in our waste stream that are that can't be managed, that or should not be managed through traditional curbside recycling or composting initiatives. And you know, we have talked about, and there are recommendations that are reflected here that look at how we can expand material types in the hazardous household chemical and computer recycling facility that the city already has, which is a permanent facility. There's a lot more that we can potentially take there, and looking at what are those items that we can accept. And then also looking at increasing options throughout the city, right? We know that there are a big barrier may be transportation, and people may not be able to go out to the HCCRF, and there may be a potential to you know, broaden the locations throughout the city for us to provide access to folks. Thinking about other high priority safe disposal, and where we can create systems for people that have things that need to be safely recycled or handled, and how we can potentially drive new opportunities for the city to maybe come and collect those, or to just expand things like pharmaceutical drop-offs here. High volume specialty materials diversion opportunities is another category. One of the recommendations that is exciting for us that has come out of this research is looking at the potential for textile recycling, you know, the collection of shoes, clothes, and other textiles that would otherwise end up in landfills. There are exciting models that are out there that also include revenue sharing potential for the city of Chicago, and we're learning a lot more about that recommendation. And the final category is construction and demolition debris. And you know, as you all can imagine, there is a tremendous amount of potential for us to be doing more in this space. You know, so the first category is looking at construction and demolition, debris diversion, a number of recommendations, beginning with recommending that the city look into ways in which it can overhaul the current CND recycling ordinance. And then also looking at ways that we can continue to engage contractors and educate them on the ordinance just to increase compliance overall, is another recommendation here. Developing opportunities for building material reuse. Again, really leaning on training as an opportunity for contractors, thinking about ways that the city can drive initiatives for deconstruction. Could we potentially create a deconstruction grant program for homeowners? And is there an opportunity to look at a deconstruction pilot program is another recommendation. And there are a few more recommendations in this category, including either a reuse warehouse or platform. I'm going to now turn it over to my colleagues, Chris and Wilson, who are going to walk us through implementation and next steps.
Thanks, Angela. And thanks, Megan and the folks at Delta for getting all of us together today. So I am going to cover just some of the some of the recommendations that are coming from this work in the waste study, and some ones that we're going to jump on immediately for this year and for next year to start working on. Angela mentioned a few of these already, and just to kind of reiterate, you know, the recommendations themselves cover 3 different categories, sort of the optimal, the practical, and a piloting recommendation. So we're taking on, as Angela mentioned, about 12 of these for this year, next year. The first couple that I want to spend time talking about are the idea of, and these are optimal strategies for developing or at least doing the research again to see how the city of Chicago could possibly implement waste hauling zones for commercial collection. Ning and her team at UIC put together this characterization update, and obviously one of the areas that they covered was industrial, commercial, and institutional waste. All of those waste streams are, as Ning mentioned, managed by private waste companies. Really what that means from a practical standpoint, if you're a high density residential resident or you are a commercial business, a small business owner, you're going to be working with a commercial waste company. You're going to be working with a private waste garbage collection company to do that servicing. In this city, we don't control the areas where those companies can operate. As Angela mentioned, specifically Los Angeles and New York City have both moved towards this model where they control the number of zones that exist in a city and who can operate in those areas, to provide greater regulatory, greater oversight, greater data collection, greater transparency. But first and foremost, at least from our perspective, it's understanding the waste volumes and the recycling and being able to really push back into the volume of material that is out there and have a better sense on how we divert that material from landfill and how we recycle more of that material. The idea of a waste hauling zone checks a lot of boxes from this study itself. It definitely checks a lot of boxes too from the Inspector General's report that covered the way the city is managing the enforcement of our recycling ordinance, but also with that, the way we do data collection for these waste hauling companies. If you have these commercial zones set up, essentially all of that is streamlined and set up by the city, the government to run these zones and do the data collection. And we need to investigate what that would mean for the city. It's a big lift, and it's a real game changer if we are able to get to it. That is definitely not an easy proposition, and is going to take some research before we can even get to doing that. But I do think that it is a key component to managing the waste from now and into the future. It covers a wide variety of city departments, from streets and sand to the health department to CDOT. So that is a massive undertaking, but it is something we are starting to look at this year. It takes a lot of work and research to figure out how we would implement something like that. Second one is this idea of extended producer responsibility. Angela also mentioned this, and the progress that is happening in a lot of other states. Some folks would refer to this as more of a European model. Look, there's examples of this that happen in North America, Canada, particularly the city of Vancouver, British Columbia, has had an EPR laws on the books for the last 10 years. They've seen great success in adopting those that EPR legislation. And what that would do for the municipal structure, it's essentially a bottle bill, but if you're familiar with what a bottle bill is, a deposit on a specific container type. But this would cover just about every type of packaging that is out there. And as far as how that would happen in this city, it would have to probably be a statewide initiative. That's the way most of the other legislation that is being introduced across the country is happening. It's happening at the state level. The momentum has started in the state of Illinois. There's conversations we've had with other municipalities in this region that are very interested in seeing what the legislation that's been introduced in other states and how that could possibly happen here. So, those two alone are major game changers, and definitely optimal strategies for us to consider, and ones that, with the direction of the mayor's office, we're looking into. Construction demolition debris. I think Angela also covered a couple of these. The one I'll point out is, doing more education with the contractors for the ordinance that already exists and how they can do a better job of capturing that material and making sure it's diverted and not heading towards landfill. Next slide. So these next set of plans for 2021, again, I know Angela mentioned these things. This first one, this National Resource Defense Council, we are part of a cohort of Midwestern cities. This came directly out of the study and the work with Delta to be a part of this group to do a lot of info share on what's happening in other cities related to food rescue and food waste. The part of the project that we've brought and have submitted to NRDC is to look at community garden as composting sites for residential material. So there is a network of at least 120 urban farms, urban gardens that exist across the city. We are looking as part of this NRDC grant to find 5 of those locations that could partner to take in residential organic material and compost it. That we're really excited about the work we've done thus far. We're working with a local group called Neighbor Space to help us manage that, and to find partners in these 5 different gardens across the city. This second point on here about maintaining consistent and clear messaging about recycling and contamination. I know the frustrations that residents have had with our Blue Card program, especially anybody that's in a low density household that uses our program. There's been certainly a lot of negative press about Blue Card and the amount of material that we divert through that program and contamination. We have not done a good enough job as far as being clear with residents and messaging residents on a consistent basis of how to interact with our program, right? What constitutes contamination? And that is an absolute necessity going into 2022, that we have a campaign that definitely targets and messages what we need to do better with regards to Blue Card. But we've taken it upon ourselves, because of a lot of the recommendations we're seeing in the study, that waste generation, waste diversion is also something that needs to be discussed. Even the ideas of promoting and messaging to residents about fly dumping is a need. It's an area of need that we have. So just consistent messaging overall for waste and recycling from our department and from the city is an absolute must. A couple of the other ones I'll quickly kind of click through. Part of the organics discussion that we've had, and if you saw what the UIC team put together for us as far as what the impacts could be if we get to doing more organics collections. Look, as far as piloting something, we're looking to do this fall a pumpkin collection smash post the Halloween holiday. This is something that we know other municipalities have engaged with. It's something that at least gets people engaged and understanding of separating out this specific material type. Certainly it's something we can get up off the ground for this year. Other things that would really help our waste stream and certainly would help recycling in general is engaging in better information resources for options for those things like HHW, household hazardous waste, and e-waste, where we can ask residents to find those avenues to send that material there, as opposed to putting it out for garbage or recycling collection. That is, again, something that we need to do a better job of messaging. Textiles, I know Angela mentioned this. We've talked with other municipalities in the region who actually collect their own textiles as clothing and shoes, and they're actually generating revenue from the material itself. Just in looking at it very briefly the last few weeks, there is a very decentralized collection that already happens with a lot of these donation boxes that exist around the city. There's well over 100 opportunities that people would have, I think, just through the Gaia movement to divert textiles, clothes, and shoes. We just see it as a very simple area for us to start going after, promoting more, and encouraging people to look at their waste stream and the material that they have to get rid of in a different way. Next slide. Lastly, these last three are very specific to streets and sand. The balancing the level of blue carts and black carts that exist out there is an absolute necessity for our department. It's a big undertaking. I think the numbers that are out there is there's probably well over 1 million carts that are out on the street, both black and blue carts combined. What, from my perspective and from Wilson's perspective on the recycling side, we need more opportunity for people with regards to recycling containers, right? And trying to work on pushing less garbage containers out there. It's sort of a novel concept amongst folks here at Streets and Sand, but we need to do a better job of providing recycling opportunities as opposed to garbage opportunities. Again, there's been lots of talk about improving what happens in the high density sector. The Inspector General did do an audit of the enforcement of our program, of our data collection, of our messaging and enforcement. We have already begun to make a lot of the changes and taken on a lot of the recommendations that the IG's office has provided to us. There is more work to be done there. We are not finished. But as part of that messaging for greater waste and recycling, we know consistent messaging is needed for our folks that live in high density residential buildings. Lastly, to touch upon organics again, we know we need to get to a system where we're providing more opportunity for diversion of organics through yard waste collections and trying to figure out a way to include food scrap or other organics with the yard waste material that we do collect. And I think that is the last slide. I think we're up for discussion feedback.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And we've had a few questions filter in through the question and answer. And we've got about a minute to address some of them. I can start us off with a really easy one. If we have a list of the individuals and organizations that were consulted, yes, that's in our existing conditions report, everyone who was interviewed and throughout the course of developing the strategy. So please make sure and check that out. And then I think we may have time for just one question. So there's a few that have a similar theme that I would address probably towards Wilson and Chris about a lack of faith in kind of what happens to materials in the blue bin program and trying to build that trust on how this collection is effective and how to build that trust in communication. You touched on a few of these, Chris, but wanted to see if there was anything else you would add to that.
Well, I just know that, people had a lot of issues with previous contractors. We've had to do collections across the city. We have engaged with a new vendor, Lakeshore. They're a local company that's been working with us since the beginning of June to do recycling collections in about 400,000 of the 600,000 households that we service. Absolutely doing a better job of messaging on recycling is something we need to do. It's one of the recommendations. It needs to be something that's consistent and clear with regards to what constitutes contamination and what our materials look like. I think the other thing too is we have more programs that we need to develop here at Streets and Sand for other material types. I know that there's a lot that we talked about that are not blue cart related, but that are waste related, whether it's organics or whether it's these other specialty materials. The biggest issue that I've seen that we've had to deal with internally are things like bulk collections or other specialty materials, and whether it's providing people just the information to find places or locations to take that material to, or if it's us doing the operations ourselves. It is a massive undertaking if we were going to try to provide organic collections at a residential level. But doing the messaging and being consistent with that messaging and being clear is definitely been a deficiency of ours. We need to be doing a better job of that. That's definitely something we're committing to for this year and for next year.
Thanks, Chris. And we are at 4 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of everyone's afternoon, but would encourage the questions to reach back out to this group and continue the conversation. As I think everyone mentioned, this is just an exciting first step for the city. And so I think I'll pass it over to Angela for any closing thoughts, and then we'll look forward to continuing this work.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you all for your time. Again, I appreciate you. I know that we're a couple minutes over. I will just say that something that I think we said in the beginning of the presentation, that the attempt here is really to set a new direction. We know that there are a lot of really incredible all of the recommendations that are coming out of the report are incredible, and the city takes these recommendations really seriously. Apologies, I'm getting a call. And these are recommendations that we take seriously. There is a tremendous amount of interest from this team to continue to drive forward. The 12 recommendations that we put forth are near-term priorities, are things that we know that we can do right away, right? We don't have to wait for a new budget appropriation. We don't have to wait for increased capacity. Those are things that we are confident that we can take on now. You will see additional recommendations that will be coming forward as the city, that we will move on as the city increases our capacity in this space. And we will just continue to move the needle here. So appreciate you all, appreciate those questions. And just, I know a lot of you are in the advocacy space here and want to see the city succeed. And we appreciate your voices in those conversations as well. So thank you very much for your time and your interest in this conversation.
Thank you, everyone.